Hey guys, Professor Joey here, and I will say before this video starts that this video, all the proceeds that we make are going to be going towards a charity to help rebuild the devastation from the California wildfires. We're also going to be hosting a tournament on Friday. I'm going to be live streaming it, and all the money that we make from that will also go towards the California wildfires. But without further ado, let me tell you about this video. So this video is a coaching video. I'm going to be trying to do this at least once a week. And what happens is a lot of times people make these tiny mistakes or massive mistakes, depending on the player. And you just don't realize it until you look back or you have someone else look back at your game and show you what you did wrong. So this is exactly what I'm going to do. I'm going to break down the whole game and show you exactly what went wrong and why that was a problem. So enjoy. Alright guys, so right off the bat, this is a Doflamingo mirror match, so I will say, before we even start the game, the most important thing about Doflamingo mirror matches is learning when to pressure board and when to pressure life. The thing is, Doflamingo in a standard deck only plays 4 blockers, which are the boas. The problem is, those blockers can be bounced at any time. So, in the mirror match, you have to balance your life and you have to balance your hand, okay? So what happens is you don't want to get too high of a hand size because then you're in danger of getting puddinged for like 3 to 5 cards. So that's why you don't want to hoard cards in your hand. But you also don't want to take too much life as well, because if you take too much life, you basically are just taking 7s for the rest of the game, and you have to start dedicating 2 cards to counter out of that per turn or per attack. And the problem is if you go too low in hand size, then they can just control your board and win, in a grind game. So that's kind of like the struggle with the Doflamingo mirror, is kind of finding that middle ground that you're able to be aggressive, control the board, and keep a decent hand size, basically the whole game. All right. So with that in mind, that's what you need to pay attention to whenever you're starting this mirror match. So the first mistake our player here that we're spectating makes is he plays the Sengoku. Now, Sengoku is super risky, because if you don't find a teach, which he did, by the way, then you're pretty much just completely screwed. But also, the thing is I'd much rather, I don't like playing Teach on my 3-Dawn turn, because unless I have double Weevil in hand, I'm going to be losing a ton of cards early on, and I don't like that. Right? Because like I said, you don't want to be too high in hand size, but you don't want to be too low either. So using Teach too early actually is a problem, because you're not going to get enough cards. The reason I like Perona is because Perona always gives you a free card off the top of your deck, and the cards in your hand are resources, right? They're counter, they're playing cards, they're searchers, whatever it is. And if you play them if you use Teach's effect for your leader effect, then you're basically not using cards from your deck, you're using cards from your hand, which is good in certain situations. Just right here in the beginning of the game, I don't believe it's very good at all. Alright, so the next mistake he makes here, guys, is this Teach play. So what happens is he plays Teach, and then he uses Teach's effect to play the Weevil there. Now, that's not a bad idea in theory, right? Because you want to keep the Jinbei active for your next turn. The problem is you're starting to run out of cards a little bit, even though you do have a Sengoku, which is fantastic. But another issue is if you play the Weevil and only the Weevil, then they only have 1 card to deal with that. And they can do so in a variety of ways. They can do so with a Law. They can do so with just attacking into it, especially since they have a Teach of their own. There's a lot of ways they can actually get rid of this Weevil, and you're going to be losing all of your tempo. Now, the reason that this tempo is really important is because when you're going first, you can apply a lot of pressure early because you get the first attack into their life. And then also, if you can establish one character as well and keep that character on the board, which he's going to be able to do, especially if he plays Jinbei plus Weevil, is you can start applying pressure really early, and your opponent's going to want to play around pudding, so you start countering and giving you cards earlier, which is super important. So in this situation right here, he ends up just putting the Weevil there and then playing the Weevil, which is great, don't get me wrong, because next turn he can go Jinbei plus Boa, and play them active, and then if he wants to, he can play something that he gets from the top of his life off of the Teach, which is actually a great idea in theory. But the problem is this is so easily countered, because if they just find one way to deal with this Weevil, then they actually take the tempo back themselves, and then all the tempo that you have, all of the benefits and advantage that you have going first is basically out the window, because you don't even have a bounce law of your own. So whatever they play, you actually can't even deal with it realistically. So you might as well try to flood the board and make them try to deal with your board in a way that's kind of counterintuitive. If that's the word I'm looking for, because what's going to happen is if they establish, for example, what's going to happen here is they're going to play Jinbei plus Boa and then attack 6 into the Weevil. Now, most of the time, the normal play is Jinbei plus Law, bounce the Weevil, and then they swing 5 into the Jinbei, which is usually just a 1k counter regardless, right? What's going to happen here is he's going to use a 1k counter to go into the Weevil. Now, of course, the Weevil's going to survive, but if he played the Jinbei and the Weevil, and then he bounced the Weevil, then the Jinbei's going to survive because all he needs is a 1k counter if he did have the law, is what I'm saying, guys. And if he bounces the Weevil, he can use it next turn to go Boa, play Boa on your 5 Dawn turn, and then with that extra Dawn you have with Teach's effect, you swing 7k with Leader, play Weevil, and then you draw another card, which is fantastic. That's realistically the route. All right, so this one right here is really important, guys, and it's a small thing. I say this to everyone I coach, but the small things really add up, and the difference between like the best player in the world and a really great player is the very, very, very tiny, subtle differences they make in decision making or searching or when to attack into what. All right, and this is one of those decisions that might seem small on paper, but it could add up in the later parts of the game. So he has an option right here. He plays Sengoku, and he has an option to search for 3 different 2k counters, right? Now, the thing is, these are 2k counters at the end of the day. All of them are 2k counters, but you want to get the one with the most utility. Now, Mihawk is great into a deck like Nami, for example, because you can start filtering for like cards like Red Rock or Gravity Blade, if, you know, that even comes up or something like that. But Buggy's great, obviously, to search for, you know, the top 3 cards of your deck and try to organize them. But the problem is he already has a Buggy in hand. So realistically, you want to treat this deck almost like you're collecting the Infinity Stones, right? What happens is Doflamingo is a toolbox deck, which toolbox decks, for those of you guys who don't know, are decks that are designed to deal with a bunch of different things, with a bunch of different gadgets, with a bunch of different cards. So, for example, Crocodile is the only card here that can bounce the Teach, and Teach in the mirror match is super important, right? So obviously he's probably not going to play it this turn to be able to get his effect, but in future turns he could actually, if he has a law in hand, he can play the Crocodile, bounce the Teach back, and then use Teach effect to play Jinbei plus law, bounce the Boa back, and now he's in a great spot, because it throws the Doflamingo off his curve and then also bounces 2 of his cards that he has to replay later for Dawn purposes. So you always want to get a card that has the most utility, especially if it does the same thing overall, which is a 2k counter. But since he already has the Buggy, he should definitely get the Crocodile here, because Crocodile can bounce the Teach in the mirror match, which could possibly come up. All right, guys, what happens here is something that's very tiny, but it's really important. Is he plays the Boa here and is actually gonna obviously play the second Boa off the top of his deck and replace the Perona. The problem is he put the Teach as the second card when it should have been Perona. Guys, when you're running out of cards, Perona is way more important than a Teach in my opinion, because the thing is, Teach only really plays cards from your hand, and when you're running out of cards, you really need to use those resources that you get from the top of your deck with Perona, and Perona is the best way to go ahead and do that. So what's going to happen is he's going to go ahead and just put those 3 at the top, obviously rearranging them like that. Now what happens is when he does play the Boa, he does end up correcting it, which is great, the second Boa, but realistically, guys, like, just make the right decision just in case, right? Like, always like practice building good habits, because that one's like super important. All right, guys, now this is probably the most pivotal decision of the game right here. Is look at the board state. He has four characters on board that are attackers, and then he has a Teach. And right here, he has 6 cards in hand. So at this point, if you start trading into his board, he's just going to go ahead and completely ignore it and play more characters over the cards that you just killed and go about his merry way. Now, this is one of those situations where you just start having to attack into life, especially because you're running out of resources, all right? You're running out of cards, and when you're behind on cards, you're always going to lose the game of advantage. So in this situation right here, you absolutely have to start attacking into life. And what's going to happen is you should swing 7 first into his leader, and then see if he takes it or anything like that, and then you swing 8 into his leader. Now the thing is, of course, your board is going to get cracked on the following turn, but your board's going to get cracked on the following turn regardless, because what's going to happen is he has 3 attacks that are massive, right? He has Jinbei, Boa, and he has his leader, and not to mention anything that he bounces back. So whether you attack into his characters or attack into his board, it doesn't matter because your characters are going to get killed regardless. Now, there is an argument to just leave your characters active, which could be fine. The problem is, you know, you need to start, putting yourself in a win condition situation, all right? And what happens is if you leave your characters active for this turn, he could just triple bounce with law, and then now your tempo is completely gone. So personally, what I would do is I would just swing 7 and then 8 into his leader and start pressuring him down and using your life that you have right now, because you're winning 5 life to 3 life, and he's probably going to take one of those hits anyway. So I would use that life that you have now as a buffer for you to be able to try to push for lethal, because you're already in a really bad situation, and it's really important that you try to find a win condition out of that situation. And unfortunately, with this situation right here, because this deck has so many answers like Gravity Blade and Law and things like that, then even if you keep your characters active for this turn in particular, it's just not going to work. You need to start putting your opponent on a clock, and the best way to do that is to attack into their life, because if you attack into their characters, they're just going to replay their stuff over it, and that's exactly what actually happens. So, and I'll show you. I'll watch it. I'll show you as we play out, right? I'm sorry. I'll play it out and show you. All right. So he's going to attack 8 into the Weevil. All right. And then he's going to rearrange the top cards. And then this is when he fixes it with the Perona. All right. Then he goes 8 into the Weevil. Let's let Weevil go. Then he plays Teach, which is also a huge mistake, by the way. He uses Teach's effect to put the pudding on top, which is a mistake because he should have been drawing into the Perona right there. So massive mistake right there. So it should have just been 7-8 or 8-7, and then he swings 8 into the Weevil or into the Jinbei and lets it go. Now at this point he has 7 cards in hand, and let's look at the end state right here. 6 into the Boa, 2k counter out. 6 into the Boa, 2k counter out. 6 into the Boa, dead. 7 into the Weevil, dead. Now let's look at this board state. It's the same exact one. He has 1, 2, 3 attackers, technically 4 with the Teach, and he has his leader, obviously. It's the same board state. So you attacking into him did literally nothing right there, right? He has even more cards in hand now, and he still has 3 life, and now you're in a much worse position right here. All right, guys, so right here I thought he was going to do an absolutely sick play. So realistically, he is at 9 Dawn. All right, so he's not at 10 Dawn, unfortunately. So what I would have done personally is, obviously, he already knew the Perona was on the top right here. So he knows that he shouldn't blind fire into that because he knows Perona's on the top. But realistically, he could have swung 9 into leader without using the effect and then just played the pudding and then basically, put him back down to 5 cards, which is fantastic. And then use his life as a resource to be able to basically take some hits. All right, but what ends up happening is he ends up playing the pudding, and then he's thinking about ending his turn. This is a turn where you don't attack. Unfortunately, you are going to take a lot of damage. You're going to probably take like a 5k hit from the Perona. You're probably going to take 4 damage this turn, which honestly is totally fine because you need to have some type of cards. You need to be a little bit risk in a situation like this. You need to risk a little bit more to be able to win the game, because if you look at the board state right here, the second you turn these characters sideways, you're playing with literally nothing. You're playing with a Perona that you're going to get on the following turn, and that Perona is always going to play a character sideways when you use it off the Doflamingo. So that's the issue, right? Is you're playing with a character that is rested, and they're just going to easily crack into it. Whereas if you leave these characters active, you're going to have 4 cards to be able to, fight back for board control, whether it be like Gravity Blade or Law or both. Honestly, that would be fantastic. Then you can actually start coming back into the game. But right here, if you turn these characters sideways, which is what he ends up doing, he's going to automatically lose the game. Now, the problem is if they do have Gravity Blade or the Law, there's nothing you can do. But you have to, in a situation where you're already really far behind, you have to play for the best possible outcome. Because if you just, in a situation like this, if they have the Law or the Gravity Blade, you probably already lost. But if they don't have the Law or Gravity Blade, then you probably are, there's a possibility you win. All right. But if you turn your character sideways right here, you automatically lose no matter what, because they're going to just eat into your board and kill you. All right. That's exactly what's going to happen here. And the thing is, this deck, Doflamingo, plays a ton of counter. Almost every single card that they play has a counter. They only play like 12 dead cards at most. So when you're putting them, it's not like they're going to draw. It's not like they're like RP Luffy where they just draw 5 big guys and, they don't have any counter. When you putting them, they're probably going to draw into some counter. So turning your character sideways right here, you can't play, obviously you can't use Teach, by the way. But he ends up attacking into Teach with his Teach, just turning all of his characters sideways, and he just loses the game right then and there. So guys, this is pretty much the end of the video right here. He basically just dies to a gravity blade after this, and then he just loses. But let me know what you guys think about this video, and if you guys want some coaching, feel free to hit me up, and then join our Discord. Links to me down below. Peace.